Hello, Helena. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so excited for our chat today. We're talking about one of my favorite things, networking. So let's talk a little bit about your background. Like, why are you the person to talk to us about networking and how did you get to this space?
I'm flattered that you think I'm the person to speak to. Very briefly, I'll explain. I grew up in England, and at 22, which is very young to decide to be freelance, but I got made redundant. The company I was working at closed, and I was at the time doing a bit of freelance writing and decided to kind of go all in, which I wouldn't recommend at 22. But my parents very kindly helped me. And I grew my business the kind of over 5, 6 years and really grew it through networking. I went to every networking group under the sun. So when I first started my business, I was really networking. So I went to tons of groups in London. That's what you could do. And over about 5 years, I grew our business nicely, only exclusively through networking, which again, I wouldn't do. But at 22 to 26, that's what made the most sense for me. I moved to Israel in 2019 and wanted to continue being a freelance writer. And there was really a lack of networking groups for English speakers in the small business space. There was a lot of high tech and a lot of Hebrew speaking, but nothing that kind of offered small business owners in English networking. So I decided to create my own group 6 months after moving here, which again, I mean, I would not move to a country and start a business 6 months after. I mean, I think it was very much like, I really needed this. So I was like, well, everybody will surely need this. How could this business possibly fail? It was really hard. But then 6 months after I started the business, COVID hit as well. So it was a very interesting first year of living here. Thank God now we are doing very well. But it has obviously been a growth journey. But for me, networking, what it really comes down to is offering people the opportunity to grow their business. And that's why it was so key for me when I lived in England and why I really felt that we needed it here in Israel.
I love that. Now I see why so many people were like, you need to connect with her because we have a lot of things in common in terms of like being able to see how we built our business. I was a dating coach for 6 years before
Yeah.
this, and I had a business doing contract paralegal work before that. And during my dating coaching time, I spent so much time and so much money on all the things that are like, you need this if you're going to succeed. You need to hire this coach. You need to take this course about sales. You need to do this thing. And looking back on it, the one thing that consistently brought me sales, brought me clients, made me money, grew my business was the relationships that I made, the connections that I built. And so that was when I kind of transitioned into my current business, Powerful Women Rising, to really help female entrepreneurs get back to that. Like, you don't need all this fancy stuff. Like, let's get back to having actual conversations with humans and like telling people what we do in like a normal human way and not a weird salesy way. And just like being in community and offering to help each other without expecting anything return. Like, they're these very novel ideas, but they're actually not at all.
But I think with when starting a business, I think there's always like obviously everyone's marketing their services. So the Facebook person will tell you you must do Facebook and Instagram, and everyone will tell you that their service is right for you. And I think it's very easy as a business owner to just feel very taught into doing lots of things. And I don't think networking is for everyone. I don't think it's for every business. I think it's really the model that works best for you. So your personality as a business owner was drawn to networking because you are communicative and friendly and warm, and people feel that. So networking really works. I think networking can work for anyone. You have to have a strategy. But I just think with business owners, I think they get kind of stressed by all the different options. Ultimately, you have to pick one and be consistent. It doesn't really matter which. I mean, it does a little bit, but ultimately, it doesn't matter that much what you choose. You have to choose one. You have to be consistent. You have to be strategic. I think networking is one of the easiest and one of the lowest cost, personally. But that for me is a really big challenge. And I see all the time with business owners that are getting like, oh, but choose one. That's
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we get really focused on quantity over quality sometimes. And like, it's better to be in 8 groups where I like know 100 people, 5%, rather than being in one group where I know 30 people, 85%. And backwards, but we're going to talk about that in a little bit. So I want to go back to a word that you used a couple times, strategy, because I think sometimes when people hear the word strategy used in conjunction with networking, like when I talk about networking, I talk a lot about like, this is just about creating genuine relationships and, having real connections and things like that. And a lot of people like think strategy is the opposite of that. Like strategy is the like manipulative, planned out, fake, transactional side of that. So how do you find that networking, like that strategy fits into networking, and how do you do that without being a salesy weirdo?
So I love the question, firstly, and I think it's really important. Okay, so when I talk about networking and strategy, I think people like you think I mean sell to the room. The first thing that I want to say, and I'm sure that you say this to your members, is networking is never about sales. We're not even thinking about sales. It's so like not on the radar. So I know that's very hard for people and it does take time, but when you're going to any networking event, you have to forget about selling. Like otherwise it's not going to work because nobody wants to be sold to. It's just icky. There's no better word for it. But when we think about strategy in the same vein, you don't want to go to a networking event and just kind of schmooze and that kind of be a nice event and that be it, because that's a waste of your time and you're not going to get business. There is a happy medium. I think people like black and white. There's actually gray there. When I talk about strategy, so I'm going to say that you're going, there's two ways to look at it. Let's say you're going to a big networking event. Your local Chamber of Commerce is doing an event for 150 people. You're turning up, two people. What are you going to do? There's really clear strategies in place that can help make that event more successful. And again, that will depend on how experienced you are. But the main ones would be arriving not hungry. Even if they say they're going to give you food, you make sure you arrive not hungry. You don't want to be the person at the networking event just be trying to get to the food table. And when it's in your talking to people, it's very hard to eat foods. So you arrive satiated, you arrive early. I think so many people arrive to networking events late because they kind of don't want to be the first. I disagree with that 100%. You want to be the second person to arrive. If you're there early, you can firstly speak to the organizer and make a relationship with them, and they're always good people to know. And it's much easier to kind of shift yourself into a conversation with like 3 people than 120. It's much less daunting. Please don't arrive half an hour early because people do that at my events and it's very stressful. I'm talking 5-10 minutes on time. I'm not talking anything beyond that. As an organizer, it's quite horrific.
I was totally thinking that as you were talking. I was
Yeah,
about
yeah,
to
don't
jump in and be
arrive.
like, but not that early.
No, we do a big mega networking event every year. Last year we were 160 people and people arrived really early and we just didn't let them in. We did send out helpers with like food and wine and water for them. And it was inside. They weren't like outside in the cold or whatever, but we just didn't let them in because we weren't ready to accept them. There's a process in place and we needed to kind of funnel them through. So
Yeah.
yeah. But 5-10 minutes, please don't arrive before that. As an organizer, it's just very challenging. But 5-10 on time is perfect. So that's that. And then when you're at the event, and again, this really depends on your experience, I would go with a mission of speaking to X amount of people. You say to yourself, I'm going to speak to 5 people, I'm going to speak to 10 people, and then you go home. Why am I saying that? Again, I would never do that myself because I'm crazy, but for most people, that's appropriate because you're going to go with a clear mission in mind. You can tell yourself a pat on the back, I've done what I came to do. And those 5-10 people you can actually follow up with because you'll remember the conversations with them. Because that's the most important part of networking, and it's the same for smaller groups as well, is it's the follow-up that's key. It doesn't matter if you meet them once, that's irrelevant. I also want to add one thing, that when you're talking to them, don't take up too much of their time. You speak to them for 10 minutes, you end the conversation politely. I'd love to follow up. What's your LinkedIn? What's your number? What's your email? And then you follow up with that one-to-one because that's where the magic's going to happen. You build a relationship with them. So I'm saying you have 5 meaningful, exciting them with a click conversations, because you can have a few that are just like hi and it doesn't work. That's for the strategy for like a big event. Again, I can go more into the details there, but those are the broad strokes. When you're going to events like I have, which are more like structured networking, where you're meeting the same person time and time again, and you will have the opportunity to give your 60-second pitch, you want your 60-second pitch, and again in those one-to-ones, so those chats outside, to talk about referral partners. And what do I mean by that? You're not asking for the types of clients you want. You're asking for the types of business owners that they're going to refer you those clients, because it's very awkward for someone to be like, to introduce you as a potential supplier. It's also awkward for them. What's very easy for them is if you're a web designer, and a great referral partner for you is graphic designers, because they'll refer you work that they can't do, let's say. It's very easy for your friends at networking who's met you time and time again and really likes you to be like, this is Charlie. Charlie's great. I think the two of you would really get along. You have a lot in common. You overlap, but you don't do the same thing. Have a chat, and your job is done. That's a really easy, that's a win for everybody. It's easy on the person you're meeting with because they've made a nice connection. And it's then on you to build that relationship. That's the strategy of networking. And those big events that have a very, very, very clear idea of how many people you're going to speak with and doing that follow-up. And then at the smaller events where the people you meet in time and time again, talking about those referral partners and saying it over and over again. And then last thing I want to say, I've talked a lot about it, is it's so important to turn up to a networking event, whether they're big or small, with an idea of what you want to do. What types of people are you trying to build relationships with? What's your goal here? Who do you want to be meeting with? Understand what you're trying to do and do the follow-up. And please, I beg of you, you may get a member list after the event. Please don't add everyone to your mailing list. Please don't send a blanket email, even if you have the software to change the first name. Everybody knows what you're doing. I get complaints about it often, or not often. People are very good, but I get the complaints, not the person, not a complaint to me. Everybody knows you're doing it, and it's so gross. There's a better word, but I'm going to use gross. It's so gross. So please, please don't do that. I'm done now. That's all I have to say.
I love all of that, especially the last part.
Happy to
I do the same thing. I send out a contact list after I do my virtual speed networking events. And I say on the event, I say before the event, I say in several emails after the event, like, this is the reason you're receiving this contact list. You should only use this information for this specific reason. And
You'll still do it.
it's gotten better, but still every once in a while. My favorite is when they don't realize that I also am on the list. So they also send me the like, hey, it was so great to meet you at that event. Didn't you love Melissa? And I'm like, no, I am her. You actually send
I've
it
had
to me.
a few crazy ones. I've had obviously people emailing people who didn't come to the event and saying it was great to meet you. But I've had people use my brand name in they're clever enough to send it to me, but in their marketing basically, just send out an email to my members and basically saying I'm offering a special offer for ESN, as if like that's been approved, and as if it's like the way that they've worded it, and people have told me about it. I'm like, that has nothing to do with me. It's not okay to do that. And that's happened a few times actually.
Yeah, I don't know who's teaching this stuff, but it ain't us.
No, sure
So
not.
one of the things that I picked up when you were talking about strategy is there's certainly some strategy involved in what you're doing at the networking event. And we could probably make this into like a 9-part series between the two of us. There's certainly some strategy involved in what you're doing at the event. But what I heard you saying a lot is that there is some strategy involved in how you're preparing for the event as well. Like being really clear about how you want to introduce yourself. How are you going to balance like introducing yourself as a person, but also making sure that people know what you do and what you're looking for. Taking the time to think about like, who do I want to connect with? And maybe it's different this month than it was last month. Maybe now I'm looking for speaking opportunities, whereas last month I just really needed a copywriter. So being prepared to answer some of those questions. People ask me all the time when I do one-to-ones in a specific group that I'm in. Everybody asks at the end, what can I do to support you this month? And I used to never have an answer because I was always like, oh, I don't know, but this was a great chat. Bye. And of course, we have all this mindset stuff to work through, right? Like they don't actually mean it and they don't actually want to do the thing you're going to ask them to do and all the things. But even being prepared with an answer for something like that, I think the more preparation that you put in, the less anxious you're going to be. And you're also probably going to have a better result in the conversations that you're having as well. Do you agree?
I agree 100%. And I think, like you said, so much of it is about the mindset. And I think people approach networking kind of two ways. One is like the extrovert who's like, I love networking, I'm great in networking, I'm going to smash this, and does no work and is just super cocky, which also is not ideal, by the way. And then there's a person who's like the introvert who like really doesn't come, who was forced because everyone's told them they have to do networking, so they really don't want to, they come like being dragged there and they're really not happy about it. And they talk to one person and leave. Like those are the two extremes, and both of those extremes need that strategy. They need slightly different strategies to match their personalities, but ultimately loving networking isn't enough. You have to also work networking. It's not enough to just turn up. And the same for the introvert who's like really scared. There's so many, I have introverts who, it's funny, I've been running my business now for 5 years, and I've had people who join now who didn't join for a long time because they were so introverted and so scared. It's all about that strategy piece. It's just, I think people, cause networking is essentially just talk. People think it's essentially just talking. It's not. There's a lot more there to it, and I think people have like a bit of a problem accepting that or understanding that fully, I guess. Again,
Yeah.
not that it's like sneaky, but it's just,
Yeah. It's just it's thoughtful,
yeah, that's a
intentional,
nice word. I like
intentional. That's a good
it.
word for it.
That's a good word.
So can you give us an example, either from your own life or a story from like one of the things that you've seen at your events, of a time that you or someone else has gone into a networking event with a strategy and it's been successful?
Oh my gosh, that's a very, very good question.
It should be. You wrote it.
Did I?
Yeah.
Very nice of you. Oh my gosh, you can keep this in. I'm not
I
embarrassed.
love it when I ask people questions that they wrote and they're like, that's such a good question. I'm like, thank you.
A great question. So actually, I'm gonna look at my computer now. It's not because I'm ignoring you, but I did a women's event yesterday. We had almost 80 women. And somebody who joined ESN, who's a member of my groups anyway, came and wrote a LinkedIn post about it. And she is a self-proclaimed introvert. I don't think she's so introverted, but that's how she defines herself, and I respect that. And she didn't join ESN for a really long time because of that reason. Eventually she joined, and of course is like now loves it, thank God. And she gave tips on how she handled the event to make
Oh,
sure that
wow.
she wasn't overwhelmed by 80 people. So this is completely Dani seriously. You're welcome to go check her out. This is not coming from me, but these were her tips, which I think actually some of them I think hopefully were inspired by my content, but some of them were not from me at all, because it's not my, I'm not an introvert. It's not my truth. So arriving early, which is something I always say, definitely get there early. This I really liked, and it's not something I've thought about. If you start to feel overwhelmed, look for someone you trust and just stand next to them, which I really liked. Really loved that. This I loved. If you feel overstimulated, step outside. And I noticed that she did that, and I wasn't bothered. I wasn't aware of the reason. I thought that was such a beautiful. And this I really like. It's something my husband always tells me to do, and I'm very bad at doing it because I'm a bit of a workaholic. She says after networking and that, after a networking event, I don't do anything. I just take a nap, and I really, really like that. And it's something that I need to do more, because networking events take a lot from you, especially when you're running them. And I think, and she really liked it. She really liked the event, and I think that those tips that she went in having, I think made the event so much more digestible, because it was. I mean, we were 80 women. It was a lot. It was really a lot. And I thought that was really beautiful and such helpful tips for any introvert. And again, some of those I wouldn't think about because it is not my truth.
Yeah. What I love about those two is that it's very much about her giving herself permission to be herself and do it the way that works for her. She didn't feel like she needed to be pressured to like push through, or, oh, if I go
Um,
step outside, people are going to think I'm weird, or, whatever it was. It was just like, this is me. This is what I need. This is what's
yeah.
going to give me the best experience. And that strategy worked for her.
And as an organizer, from my perspective, at no point at all in the event did I think, oh, that's like, I noticed they were outside, but there was a few of them and I just thought it was nice. The room was a little bit small. Like none of this came from, like, none of it was noted by me. And I thought they were such lovely tips. And like I said, most of them I hadn't thought about. And I think it's really nice. I'm trying to think of other strategies in place for networking events that I've gone to. It's funny because obviously I don't keep to this with the strategy. Like I'm terrible for the strategy, of course, because that just makes sense. Because that's how it works. I'll tell you the truth with my networking strategy, and this is really a terrible thing. The truth is, my networking strategy is I'm very active on LinkedIn. And that's really the secret for me, is I'm very active on LinkedIn, and Israel is a very small business community. There is not that many of us. So once you know, you know, you know. So when I first moved to Israel, I remember going to a networking event in 2019. I traveled an hour and a half to get there. I arrived, was very overwhelmed, and left after 15 minutes. It was super overwhelming, and I'm an extrovert. I found it really hard. And that was obviously no strategy in place. I just turned up, hope for the best, and it was a nightmare. I guess that my strategy these days is that I'm really active on LinkedIn. This sounds really pompous and it's not meant to, it's just the truth. If I go to a networking event, people know me, not always, but mostly know me. And so there's a conversation starter. I recently spoke at a networking event in the States. And it was very humbling because people there less know me. And it was a real reminder that you do need a strategy in place for those events, because, and the truth is I did for that event know that would happen, and I did have a very clear strategy of bringing people in for a certain service that I offer that's relevant to people outside of Israel, and I did get a client through that strategy because I went in with that specific strategy, knowing exactly how I could. There's only really one way I could offer to American clients. There's only really one offering I have for them, and I really went in with that focus, and it did pay off.
Yeah. Well, I love that because what it's showing is that you don't necessarily use the same strategy for every single event, every single group, right? There's very different, there's the more transactional groups. There are the more relationship focused groups. There are groups where you know most everybody. There are groups where you don't know anybody. And so you may have different strategies for different ones.
I think the more I'm thinking about it, like as we're talking, I do think I go with strategies. I don't think I should think about it a lot more than I do, but I do go with strategies thinking, okay, this is an event case, it's an X market. What offering do I have for that market? And again, I'm not going in salesy at all, but I will bring that up. I will discuss it. I will kind of like have a chat with someone, feel the vibes, want a better word. So I do definitely go to each event thinking, okay, what offering do I have for this sort of event that's the most relevant? Now I'm kind of going into a different sector of high tech, which I don't have experience with at all. I want to go to those events. I'm really just trying to build relationships because I don't really have as much experience there as I would like. And so those events, I'm like, I'm here to build relationships. I'm here to grow. So it is different depending. You're right. So different depending what the event is. And the truth is that you're right. I do have strategies. It's just not something that I'm like, so I'm not writing them down beforehand, which really you should be much more intentional about it. But I've been doing this for a long time. So.
Yeah. It's a lot of your strategy is probably not as conscious as it used to be because you've
Yeah,
been
I'm
doing
only
it
for
so
10
much.
years.
Yeah.
I'm not new to networking.
Right, exactly. So you mentioned LinkedIn, and I want to talk about that a little bit, although this is a whole rabbit hole we could go down.
Wow. Yeah.
But one of the things that I talk about a lot is that networking doesn't just happen at networking events. You don't just
Wow.
network
Yeah.
at networking events and networking groups,
Something
right?
that
You
it
can
can't just happen at networking events. Like that's just not possible.
Right, exactly. And and for me, I think networking is and can happen anywhere that you're creating a connection with another human being. And for a lot of people, that's social media. A lot of people love social media. They're really good at it. They're good at connecting with people on a human level on social media. There are people who despise it and don't want anything to do with it. And so that's fine too. But for the people who do like social media, and you mentioned you do a lot on LinkedIn, how does social media play into your networking strategy?
They're intertwined. There's no way to separate them whatsoever for me personally. And I actually think it's very hard to network in this day and age without having some form of social media presence. It can be done. I think it makes life much, much harder. For me, like I said, I can now go to events and people will know me, which just makes life more pleasant and easier, to be honest. Like I have to say, there's just no two ways about it. I think it means that I'll meet someone at an event and I can never speak to them again, but they see me on LinkedIn because I always connect on LinkedIn. I should say I'll connect with everyone on LinkedIn, which you can do after an event. You can connect with everyone on LinkedIn. That's completely acceptable. I would never write a note or anything. Maybe I'd say it was great to meet you at the event, but I'll probably just send a request and that's it. So they see me time and time again, and it's just with marketing, it's so boring. It's such a cliche, but it takes time, and people have to be exposed to you. They say 7 touch points to say thoughts, whatever it is. It's rarely just once. I mean, it should be, but it's not always. So for me, they're just so intertwined in like helping each other and supporting each other. I truly don't know how people really succeed in networking without it. I
Yeah.
mean, that's
Yeah, I agree. I use Facebook a lot. I want to be more on LinkedIn, but I'm just not. And so that's a truth about
do whatever
myself
works
that
for
I'm
you.
accepting right now.
I don't think you need to be on LinkedIn at all. I just think like if Facebook's working for you, great. Just focus on that. Like I really want to be on Instagram. That is not my reality. So
Yeah,
okay.
exactly. We're just accepting the truths about ourselves today.
Yeah, but I think as business owners, we're like you don't have to do anything. You have to make money. If you're making money and you can grow your business, then amazing.
Yeah, that's certainly helpful. But one of the things that I find people ask me a lot about with networking, and you probably find this too, is the follow up. And this is like people's biggest complaint is like, I don't have time to follow up. I don't know how to follow up. I don't know how to keep track of all these people. When do I follow up with them? What do I do? And I find that social media makes the follow up much easier. Do you think so too?
I think it makes it easier. But you can also email. I think people are looking for excuses, excuse me for saying. There's always an excuse not to do the follow-up. It doesn't take that long. Like I'm the organizer of events. So when I'm in I had my women's event yesterday. So I did a special offer that if you join this week, we're going to offer this like a very small set period of free membership. Okay. So I had a few people who were interested. So I followed up with them. I sent them WhatsApps, which in Israel, we WhatsApp in business. I don't know if it's so acceptable in America, but that's how we do it here. I sent them WhatsApps. My baby was home. She was not well. My baby was home all the time. I was able to do it even just with her home the whole time, which it doesn't take that long. So I think maybe I'm not so nice. I find it quite frustrating. I do think with networking, people have a lot of excuses. You find the time for what's important. And if growing your business is important, you'll find the time for it. That's number one. If you have LinkedIn or Facebook, it is easier to send LinkedIn messages for sure. But I also think an email seems a bit more, sometimes can feel a bit more professional. And I think it's very easy. I mean, when I do events, I write down very clearly a list of like a heading. This person's interested in this. And then I write the list of that. And then the next heading and then the list. Just cross them off when I've heard from them. Chase them. I would chase people myself only twice. I would send an email and then a follow-up email. I personally would never go beyond that. Everyone does what they would like. That's my way of doing it. And when you're doing a follow-up, what you're asking for, I mean, it really depends. As an organizer, it's different, but if you're just asking for a chat, I'd just love to meet with you. Hi, it was so, I mean, you can write templates. Hi, it was so great to meet you. I love talking about insert topic. How is your cat doing? I hope they feel better. Like, you scream from the conversation, and then say, listen, I would love to have a chat with you. And what I personally think is really helpful for people is if you give them, don't send them a calendar link, give them 5 dates, give them 5 options of dates. People are really lazy and they don't want to give you options. They don't necessarily want to go through a link. Just say, I'm available on these 5 dates. Do any of these work for you? And if not, please send me dates you're available. And of course, I'll make it work. Make it as easy as possible for people. I just think that's the key. I don't think it's that challenging. I really do.
No, I don't think it is either. I mean, it's not hard and it's not, it doesn't take a long time, but you do have to be intentional about like setting aside the time to do it and making
Yeah.
that a priority, like you said.
But we have to take responsibility for our actions. Like, we have to say that we are business owners and we've come here to show up. And this is part of my networking. And if you're going to a networking event, I'm going to tell you a secret. There's no point going if you're not following up. If you don't have the time, then just don't go. It's also okay. You don't have to go to every event. But if you're going to go, then to not follow up is you might as well have not gone to the event. You're not going to get this. Occasionally, of course, I've also had it where you go to an event and it happens to be that person needs your service and you get really lucky and you get business from that. It does happen for sure. And it's beautiful and it's lovely, but it's very rare. That's the exception to the rule. You are the rule. It happens in the follow-up. So just be aware of that.
Yeah, I love that. Great points. I feel like we need a part 2 and a part 3, so we'll have to come back for more of this. I could talk, these are topics I could talk about all day long. And there's so much that goes into all of them because we're all such different people, right? Like, we're going to approach it differently if we're introverts. Everyone is surprised when I say I'm an introvert. I'm like, no, you just think I'm not an introvert because I'm like super awkward. But also when I get really nervous, I just like say whatever's in my brain and somehow it comes out funny. And you guys all think I'm funny and like this outgoing comedian person.
I think people think of introverts as socially awkward, and it's not the same thing at all. Like, you can be introverted and be incredibly friendly and warm.
Yeah.
I
And
feel
confident.
Yeah, 100%. Like, I think I come across as extremely extroverted. I think you do come across as more introverted, but we're both warm, friendly. Like, I think there's a lot of confusion around what introverted really means.
I like
And
introvertism. That's a good one.
again, it is not my truth. I'm definitely not an introvert.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's more clear. I think it's harder to tell in a networking event, like when you're interacting with someone, as opposed to like what happens after the event, right? Like, do you leave there feeling like so jazzed and excited and like, what are we doing now? Who are we talking to now? What's next? Versus I leave and I'm like, I don't even want to turn the radio on. Like, let's just drive home in silence.
So I really do love my networking events, and events I go to, it really depends. But I really thrive on problems. Like, if there's an issue, like, that's when my adrenaline really hits, and that's when I'm really ready to rock and roll. I had an event a while ago. It was our big mega event, and it went beyond smoothly. There was no issues. I'm not saying this to brag, like we do it for 4 years, like we're making it bigger next year, like because it was too smooth. You need to improve every year. There was really no issues. It was so smooth. And that's mostly due to my husband who helps with everything and he's very good at logistics. And I left feeling a bit flat actually, because yesterday we had a bit too much drama. There needs to be a happy medium, but I need a little bit of like a fizz. Like I need that kind of gets me going, that adrenaline. And it was so smooth. Like it was really a bit scary. But we made up for it yesterday where we had like, key people who didn't show up. Like there was a lot more issues yesterday, which, gave me that adrenaline buzz that I so desperately crave. But that's for my therapist to work out, I suppose, private.
It's funny. It's also funny because I wore my no drama shirt for you today. But your
Yeah,
shirt says yes drama. Please,
yeah, I
please more
do.
drama.
Yeah, I watch a lot of reality TV, which I think still speaks to my character in a big way. Yeah, my husband will like tell me things happening in his office, and I'm like, I need more. He's like, he has the basic facts. I'm
No, they
like,
never ask the right questions.
give me more. Invite them round to our house now. Let's get drinks and let's get this information out. I need to know why they got broke up. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, no, it's not my best quality, I wouldn't say, but it is intrinsic to who I am. I want to say I really like gossip about people I don't know. Obviously, about people I know, it's very sad, and it must sound like a terrible person. I'm generally very lovely, but I do love reality TV.
Yeah, same. I do too. Okay, so if people want to connect with you more, if they want to learn more about English Speaking Network, if they want to just follow you for your awesome networking tips, if they just want to hear your accents more, what's the best way for them to connect with you? We get really excited about accents here in Colorado.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm like a scumbag. Like I'm from the north of England, so my accent
No, it's
is
so
like,
lovely.
if you're British, it's nice you say that, but it's not London. It's like, I don't sound posh. So thank you so much. So LinkedIn, the name is Helena Baker, which I'm sure we spelled beautifully in the show notes. Instagram, if you'd like to follow me there, it's Network with Helena. There's always a very good intention around posting. I can't pretend I always do. And I'm actually launching my own podcast on the October the 29th, which is the 5th year birthday of English Speaking Networking. And we're speaking to 5 business owners in Israel with more than 5 employees who've been going for more than 5 years to celebrate our 5th birthday, about 3 failures they've had in business. So that is being launched on October 29th, and it'll be on all where you get your podcasts at Failing Our Way to Success.
Awesome. That's exciting.
It's exciting.
Super
It's a lot of
exciting.
work of podcasts, so I very much respect what you're doing. I did not appreciate the level of work that goes into these, I have to say. And
Yeah.
now I do.
Yeah.
Now
It's worth it though. It's super fun. I love it.
I'm super excited about it. I'm really excited.
Yeah.
I'm really excited about it. It's fun.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being a guest. I loved our conversation. You and I are very much on the same wavelength, so we will definitely have you back on the show again.
So much. Thank you so much for having me. Have a lovely day.
Day.